So today we're going to talk about how to move heavy stuff both vertically and horizontally. So this in SHTF is a critical skill for you for doing construction, salvage, repair work. And also this is a barterable skill. This is something that you could use to trade with other groups and organizations. If you can perform these functions, that is a valuable skill that you can use as a barter technique. Now, one thing I really like about this manual, and it is TM5-725 rigging. It has an extensive listing of knots that you would use for construction purposes, and it gives you step-by-step directions on how to tie them. And it lists a lot of stuff that you're not going to see in other places. So a lot of this is specific to using hooks, rigging things, moving things, and lifting things. And then you also have basic knots like your 2 half hitches. So one of the things that we would use a lot in SHTF is the timber hitch. And it shows us here how to do a timber hitch and then use a half hitch in order to pull a log. And then we also have different types of round turn and half hitches that we can use to secure things to a post or a tree. And then we also have the clove hitch, which is instrumental on how we lash things together. This is what we start and finish a lot of lashings with. So this book is set up, and it starts with the basics of the basic knots you use to make riggings. And this is a skill that you can easily learn at home using rope. You can do the step-by-step, and you can learn these knots on your own. And then, of course, you can also do this during SHTF if you have a hard copy. Now, square lashes are a critical skill. It shows you here step-by-step how to do it. You start with a clove hitch, you do your wraps, and then the frap is actually a tensioning on your wraps. Now here we have the basics of shear lashing, and a tripod lash or a frame lash is basically a expanded shear lash. And then what would happen under it is you would lash your block and tackle, and this gives you what the actual wrap looks like. So what this is 3 wraps above, 2 wraps through the hook, 3 wraps below, and then the 2 ends are joined with a square knot. Now in the back there is a more complete drawing of this. And then we talk extensively about how to splice both fabric rope and also wire rope. So here we're lashing together and fixing wire rope. So you have steel wire rope, and then you have different types of fabric type ropes, hemp, nylon, and there's charts in here that tell you the lifting capacity and breaking capacity of all these materials. Now, this is something I've rarely seen. This shows you the correct way to use compression clamps to put an eyelet into wire rope. So the top one is the correct one. And when you're looking at this, the shackle round portion is at the end of it, and the tension bolts are on the long strand. This is the correct way to do it. And you can see here, these are incorrect. So this properly tensions and forces the strands into themselves. This is a critical piece of information if you're going to be working with wire rope. Now, the next thing is lifting. You need a mechanical advantage, so you're going to have to learn how to use blocks and tackles. These can be operated by fabric rope, or they can be operated by steel wire rope like you would have in a crane. And the thing I like about this book is it shows you step by step how to run the lines on blocks and tackles and set them up. If you have people and you need to teach them, this is how you do it. Then here we have a bar lashed to this block and tackle to keep it from turning. That's another important thing that's rarely seen. Now, with different kinds of block and tackle setups that they show you in here, they show you the mechanical advantage. This is 4-to-1. This is 16-to-1. This is 6-to-1. So it shows you how much you can multiply your efforts. You can multiply your pull efforts by 16 times if you rig properly. This allows you to move incredibly heavy things with a few people. Now here we're going to talk about anchorages, how we attach the stuff to pull against, to use as a stationary attachment point. This is where we take and we lash a pole across 2 trees and we use that as a pull point. This is using a rock as an anchorage. And then here, this shows you step by step how we use multiple stakes driven in the ground. And it shows you how much force you can pull against. Now, we also here are using steel pickets, and it goes through and it talks about using them to make anchorage points, as well as how to use a steel plate and stakes and use that as an anchorage point. Then we get to the crux of the issue. This is a basic diagram of a gin pole and how we can lift stuff. So you have your anchorage here, and you use all your knots and your lashes to construct this. And you can see here we have anchorage points here, here, and here. And then we have our power line running in, up, and down to the object we're lifting. This gives you an example of the angles involved, where you have a 90-degree angle. Then here, they call this a shear, or a shear gin pole, where you have basically a bipod. So you can have a single pole and you can have a bipod. And then if you need more lifting capacity, you can always go up to a tripod. So here I'm going to show you the details of how we hook a block and tackle and lash it to either a gin pole, a bipod, or a tripod. So here we're showing all the knots, how everything is fastened. Here's another view. And then to give you an idea of the size of the poles you can use, it's as big as a pole as you can lift with your people. So you can use telephone poles, tree trunks, and this is an example of them setting it up. And what they've done is dug a hole here they're going to slip it into. Now, there's other ways to fasten these to the ground if you're in a hard area like concrete or paving. This is an example of a gin pole being used to move a steel girder. Now, this photo makes it look like it's over them, but it's not. It's actually several feet behind them. And you can see the crew here is pulling the rope and moving this by hand. This is an example of a tripod shear lash. So what we're doing is modifying the shear lash to hold 3 pieces together. This is your detailed view of a tripod. It's showing your block and tackle. It's being hung here. So your block and tackle is below. Your pull line goes down. You have a snatch block here, and then this goes to power. And you notice they've tied these legs together so that your tripod won't move. The other thing you can do is go in here and you can lash a cross piece on here. So you can actually lash a log here, here, and here, which would make it even stronger. Now this is critical for lifting things up out of holes, manholes. If you have a floor that has a hole in it, you can lift things up through it. Now this is your bipod, and it's showing how it's tied from here to here. You have a connection point, then you have your block and tackle, power line comes down, you got a snatch block, and then this goes to the actual winch, power, or people. This gives you details on how to tie it. Now, this is an example. This is an example of how a shear is being lifted by people. And of course, another name for a shear is a bipod. This is a shear in use, lifting a piece of steel. Now, this is a derrick. So basically what happens is with a derrick, you have a gin pole that's attached lower onto a post. And then you're going to use a block and tackle here and here to multiply the amount of weight you can lift. So you can see how this is rigged. Now, this is a split pole so that you can actually rotate this around your center pole. Then you have guy wires holding this down. This used to be used on ships a lot, made out of steel. I've had these where I used them in factories to move stuff. Now, this is a military version where you have a gin pole or a boom pole that's made out of a steel. So if you can salvage a piece of a crane, you could actually rig this up and use a crane boom that you salvaged. So even if you have no fuel or you had an EMP and the equipment didn't work, you could actually take a crane boom and actually make yourself a gin pole with it. Now, cribbing and using rollers is a critical skill. Let's say you had a fuel tank that you wanted to salvage and move. What we have here is skids on the ground, and we have logs. I've used telephone poles for this, where we moved communication shelters up mountains. So you have a frame your item sits on, and you have these rollers. And what you would do is you'd have one set of skids here. Then you'd have a crew that moved and put a second set of skids in front of it. They would pull it onto that set, and we take these skids up and move it in front. So we would just leapfrog the material as we pulled it on these rollers. Now, if you have to lift something heavy and put it in position, the way you do that is you use cribbing wood and you use jacks. So what you would do is you'd use jacks in order to pick something up gradually, and then you could use cribbing to hold it. So what we would do is once we got it up where we could put another lift of cribbing wood here, we would do that. Then we put more cribbing on here, reset the jacks, and lift it again. So these are basic critical skills that you're going to need in SHTF. Now, there's a lot more material in this book about scaffolding, rope work, that would be extremely useful to you. But this is a critical core skill. Learning these things, you can do it at home. You can do it on your own. And if you want to practice making gin poles, making bipods and tripods, what you can do is use 4x4s that are 12 feet long, and you can practice making and tying them with those. Or you can go in the woods and cut you some small 3 or 4 inch saplings, and you can practice using that. And once you have the skill to actually put one together, then you can take in real life and actually build big ones that you can lift massive amounts of equipment with. So please share your thoughts. We'll see you on the next video.